We have it available. For the last few weeks, we've been exploring not just the history, but Jewish literature and things that shape Jewish life. And we started with the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. We went on to discuss scripture and prophets of scripture. The following week, we discussed Medrash. We went to Mishnah and Talmud. Last week was philosophy, Hakira, and Musar. These topics each gave us this insight on what the Torah says, which we partially know. Those studying on a regular basis or semi-regular basis or heard quotes from it are familiar with some of those lines. And the following weeks, we've received more insight on other teachings that have been introduced later on. And we even had samplings of those teachings throughout the weeks. Now, here's why I'm excited about this week's class or subject. Because say I was born in Montreal and I went to study in Israel at the age of 13. I went to study in Israel and learned there throughout yeshiva. So 14, 15, 16, studied there in yeshiva. And because I left Montreal so early, and I would just visit back on Passover or other times, I only issued a permit. I only got a permit, a driving permit, but I never had a chance to get a license. Now, I'm in Israel, and I've got lots of relatives, which means lots of cars available. And that also means that I would like to travel, go around whenever I could. And so I had my permit, my driving permit, which I've used to drive around. Now, mind you, a driver permit means that an adult needs to be with you in the car. But not every time there was an adult in the car. There are other people in the car, but not an adult. And so during my time in Israel, I learned driving from driving. And a cop once asked, what is this certificate? I'm like, well, it's a driver's license, but since it was all in French, he didn't know how to read, and I was off the hook. And in fact, it was only after I got married here in Tucson that I got a driver's license at my wife's insistence, because it's Arizona, there's no transportation all over. Now, here's what I learned. Because I studied, as I said, I studied how to drive at a later age. So this is 25, 26. I got my license for the first time. And let me just say, if you navigated these Israel streets, you can navigate anywhere, so you're good. So it's really a lesson for life. But I studied, and they teach you a lot of things about, first of all, they teach you the rules of the road, right? Who gets right of way, when to stop, when to go, etc. You have all that information, which means the information around you. Then there's information of how to use what you're in, whether you're in a pickup truck or a car, a Mini Cooper, whatever you have, or Ford Fiesta, whatever it is, how to use that to navigate everything around you. Headlights, blinkers, brakes, etc. So that's then what you're in and around you. Then there is what's in the car, things that the car could be useful to you. There's lights in the car, right? There's AC, there's the radio, back in the day, there was cassettes and CDs, and now it's Bluetooth. Whatever is available, you learn what's available inside. And so now it's left to you to figure out what to do next. If you want to go from point A to point B, you utilize all the knowledge that you have in navigating the car, being mindful of your surroundings, and arrive there safely, you safely, and the people around you safely. But what happens if something goes wrong on the way? Not because you did something wrong, just because just something happened to the car. What then? So there's the simple option, a simple obstacle, a flat tire. So you typically have a spare one, and if you know how to change it, good for you. I didn't, so in San Diego, I was once stuck with my family, middle of the night, wasn't fun. But what happens if there's something else? Smoke coming out of your hood. And if you know what to do, if there's smoke comes out of your hood, you do. Stop. And then what? Pray. Call for help. Wave someone down. Depends where you are. Depends what hour. Depends if you have AAA membership. I don't know. Whatever is available. But there are times that it doesn't happen. Why don't we know how to do? Why don't we get instructions while learning in driving school? Why don't we get a crash course on what happens under the hood? Wouldn't that be useful? Well, it's not immediately relevant. It's not urgent, but imagine you knew what happens under the hood. The basics even. How to how to do the oil change on your own. That would save you what, $87 these days, right? Other basic tasks which don't seem so complex, right? What happens with Torah is that we're taught everything. This is the roadmap for life. This is how we should treat ourselves. This is how we should treat others. These are the things we should be doing in the morning and in the evening. Fill up gas, make sure your lights are on. We have all of these details. Last week we studied Jewish philosophy. We're also, you could compare it to, we're also taught on what radio channels to put on to keep yourself in a good mood. What lighting is most recommended? What companionship should you have in your car? You're driving alone, might be boring. Someone positive, might be fun. Someone you love, even greater. But what happens when things go wrong? You don't have that in Deuteronomy. You don't have that in Genesis. What happens when things go wrong, when things are tough? There's inspiration that you could take from the Torah. But the Torah says, honor your parents. Okay, what if I don't feel like it? What if they're horrible? So Jewish law gets into the detail. Well, if they're horrible this way, ignore them. If they're horrible that way, you still have to honor them. And there's a full detail on how horrible they have to be in order for how you should react to them. Break it down. But then you get to Musar, we discussed last week, Jewish behavior. And Jewish behavior will say, well, regardless of what they say about your parents, how they act, you should still honor them regardless, because that's the right thing to do. That's nice. But then you say, well, what if I don't feel like it? My heart's not there. I could do it, but I don't feel I'm connecting to it. Or what happens? An obstacle comes your way, something under the hood starts smoking. What do you do then? And here's where Kabbalah comes in. Okay. Kabbalah is the under the hood insight into the world and into ourselves, because we're a picture of the world in a way. Kabbalah tells you what's our inner workings. What is the inner workings of the world? And these teachings have been passed down from generation to generation. That's why it's called Kabbalah, which means something that was received in tradition, person to person. It wasn't written down. It wasn't public. It was never public up until a certain year, which we'll learn today. It wasn't public, but these inner workings were taught.
Listen to my Zoom, honey.
Oh, you're watching the Zoom now?
These inner workings were taught through the ages.
I said
And
7
they have been.
really tonight.
Let me just turn the mute on. they have been shared with this exclusive group because another term to call Kabbalah is sod. Sod means a secret. And it's been kept a secret for a long time. Okay, now, with this little introduction, if someone asked you, or if I asked you now, what is Kabbalah? What do you know about Kabbalah? Throw out an answer. Mystical, okay, mystical, good. What else? What do you know about Kabbalah?
It's only taught to men.
Hmm?
To be over 40. It's only taught to men and they have to be over 40.
It's only taught to men, and they have to be over 40. Partially right. The 40 is correct. I never heard them,
deep,
but okay. What else?
very deep.
Very deep. Thank you, Jim. Very deep. Okay.
Well, the structure of the energetic forces of Hashem
The energetic forces of Hashem and the world. Yep,
and the world
And the
is
world.
a reflection in us.
nice. Okay, good. No one said Madonna. I'm happy. Thank you. Didn't want to go there. Appreciate it. Well. Let me flip this. The teachings of Kabbalah, some of you have a map in front of you. The teachings of Kabbalah. And we shaded it, this is the map of Jewish literature. So we shaded it it's in the back part. Yeah, it's the green and then the bluish green. So you have it based directly. So we have it on the screen to show you the timeline of it. So Kabbalah and following that Chassidism, which we'll talk about today as well. And you see the timeline of some of the major works that were presented. You see, it starts from scripture. It starts from the time of the Torah was presented. And you see, it just became available in the first century. Later on, you see the Zohar, and then there's this great stretch until it becomes way more available. Now, where do we see or where do we know of how this has been passed around? Well, there's a little insight that Maimonides gives us. And if you have the book, it's page 235. And Maimonides says as follows. He says, as you're well aware, even the Talmud, which was received by Kabbalah, tradition, but not Kabbalah as in the theory, but by tradition, was not originally committed to writing it in a book that was disseminated to the people. Now, if care was taken to avoid writing the oral Torah was everything that passed, that followed the 5 books of Moses and the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, in a book accessible to all because of the disadvantages of such a system. Certainly then no portion of the esoteric teachings of Torah, which means the mystical part, could be written, which would divulge these teachings to everyone. Rather, these teachings were orally communicated by a few uniquely qualified individuals to other uniquely qualified individuals, as I earlier explained by the saying, the secrets of the Torah can only be entrusted to skilled sages. Nothing but a few remarks and allusions to these teachings are to be found in the Talmud or the Midrashim, commentaries on the Torah. They are like small kernels enveloped in large husks, so that the reader is generally occupied with the husk without thinking that it enclosed a kernel. Which means we could be reading a text and it sounds like this is what it is. A kid looking at a car assumes that all you need to drive the car is just to press the pedal or one of the pedals and use the steering wheel, not understanding that there is a whole system hiding somewhere in plain sight. And so the Rambam says the same thing was done, that the teachings of Kabbalah were held secret. Now, why would they want to keep the teachings of Kabbalah, the mystical teachings of the Torah and the inner workings of God and the world secret? What would be the reason?
Because they were persecuted and free.
They'll be persecuted?
Because from what I, the little I know, is the mystical side of our tradition, all this stuff, back in the.
We are persecuted for many other teachings. You know, the Talmud was burnt, as we know. This is something that would not be, I can't say offensive, but it wouldn't have been it would have been read as a Talmud is read. In fact, and we'll do it today. If you read the Zohar, a basic book of Kabbalah, or some people say the basic book of Kabbalah, chances are you wouldn't understand what it's saying. And we're going to see that today, how the head just flies by trying to read it. So it wouldn't be that. A reason why it was held secret is very simple. Because there was a belief that these teachings provide, if you will, a key to these not just powerful teachings, but powerful powers. What is called Kabbalah Ma'asit, or Kabbalah Maisis, which means practical Kabbalah. There's the teaching, and then there's the application of it. And the application of it means that a select few had these powers that were beyond anything that we're familiar with. To create, to destroy. You have a few of those mentioned in the Talmud. For example, there's the rabbi named Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rashbi. He's buried in Meron, Meron, in northern Israel near Tzfat. The Zohar is attributed to him. And so there's a story told how he needs to run away from the local authorities for whatever reason, teaching Torah. He runs away and he spends, I think it was 8 to 12 years in hiding, studying with his son in a cave in the Galilee. And because he spent so much time studying, for him, the world meant a spiritual pursuit. So he walks out of years of studying, just his head working nonstop, and he sees people going along their day. And that means people just working and living life, and they arrive at one field, and this guy is just plowing his field. And for him, it was, how could you be busy with such mundane things when you could be studying and understanding and connecting to God? And so the Mishnah, the Talmud tells how this rabbi just, with his gaze, just burnt the field out of sort of rage or disappointment that how could someone be busy with such nonsense? His son understood that this is not the way to live life. You can't just burn things down that you don't agree with. And also, life is a balance between the two, not an absolute. And so the son puts out that fire with his gaze, and the field returns to what it was. But you're given an example of people that have these supernatural powers thanks to what they've been learning, what they know. And so the Talmud tells us in Tractate Chagiga, they tell us the following. 4 sages entered the orchard. Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai looked and died. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. Acher cut down the plantings. Rabbi Akiva entered in wholeness and peace and emerged in wholeness and peace. What in the world are they talking about here? Ever heard the story? No? What does this mean? Well, if you look at the word Pardes, that's Pei Resh Dalet Samach. Pardes is also similar to paradise, same word. Pardes is the 4 ways that the Torah is studied. Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. 4 ways. Pshat is a literal translation. Drush is a expanded commentary or allegories, and Sod is the secret part of Torah. And so we're told here, a Talmud, that 4 people either entered a space or they practice studying the core essence of Torah in the most elevated way. What was the result? Ben Azai was the first. Ben Azai looked and died. His body couldn't handle such spirituality. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. His mind couldn't handle the teachings. Acher cut down the plantings. He became a heretic. In fact, that's why they changed his name. His real name was Reb Meir, great sage at the time. He just became a heretic. His soul couldn't handle the teachings. And the only one who was able to handle it was our favorite Rabbi Akiva. Convert, son of a convert, whatever his history was according to some teachings, but Rabbi Akiva was able to handle it. He approached it with the right mindset and was able to study with the right mindset. The point of the story is that these Kabbalistic teachings have this immense power that over time, people were simply afraid of someone taking it and doing something bad with them. One example from history, a guy named Chacham Tzvi, ever heard of him?
What is his name?
Chacham Tzvi, the failed Messiah. Shabtai Tzvi, sorry, Shabtai Tzvi, Chacham Tzvi is the other one, a good one. Shabtai Tzvi, 15th, 16th century, is a person who studied Kabbalah, studied too much Kabbalah, and then presents himself as the new savior and destroys the Jewish community for decades, if not longer. Easily a half a century later, the Jewish community was still reeling from the destruction that he brought. He ended up converting to Islam, just an ongoing saga, which has really scared people off. As you can see the gap, scared people off from studying Kabbalah. And his work just showed how someone could take this mighty sword and instead of just cutting vegetables with it, using it to destroy lives. And he did destroy so many lives. And so Kabbalah has been approached with great caution and a mixture of awe and I would say fear throughout time. So much so that at some point we're told that anyone under 40 should not even try to study Kabbalah. I hope to get there one day. No, just one more year. Just kidding. Yeah. Kabbalah has fascinated so many because it taught us there's more to life than what we actually see. The car is more complex than just the wheels and the door and the windshield wipers. There's more to the car that we don't have access to. And it intrigued people. And some people took the initiative to discover what it was, but it was always present and hidden and locked from others. Now, if so, what changed, right? Why was this Zohar written down? Why was it published? Zohar, and you have all those that follow. Rakanti, and you have the Ramak, the Shavua, right? We'll run through them shortly. What changed? Well, if you look at how Jewish teachings were developed, you sort of see an answer to problems that every time a new reality was presented to the world or has developed in the world, another type of teaching was introduced, which means, according to that, Musar is not new to the 18th century that we know, and Medrash is not new to earlier. These teachings were always there. As in, as a line that we learned, everything that is taught about Torah was already introduced by Moshe, by Moses. The question is, do we know it all? But the idea, the core was already introduced. And so these approaches, these methods, these teachings, in a way were introduced every time the world needed them. When the world, this is lesson 2, when the world was not really in sync with the Jewish laws, it wasn't clear that the teachings will be continued, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi decides, I'm putting it down in writing. Not the whole thing, having it in short sentences, and whoever needs to know will know, but he puts it down. And then the same happened with the Talmud and other teachings as well. Every time the world needed it, another interpretation or another approach or another type of speaking method or teaching method was introduced. And so Kabbalah was introduced during, I could say, barely our time, or even more to Chassidus, which is based on Kabbalah, was even more recent, right? Chassidus is 1778 or so. That's the Baal Shem Tov, Noam Elimelech. But Kabbalah was started to become available in later years because Kabbalists figured that the world now needs it more than ever. So Advil is good, but you only take Advil when you need it. But when you need it, you really need it, right? And so that's when you have Musar being introduced, Kabbalah being introduced. Before that, you had Hakira being introduced, Jewish philosophy. All these teachings were introduced with time as the need has arisen. Let me show you a video recapping the books of Kabbalah and Chassidus, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into some of them, and we will, let me share the screen for our friends on Zoom. And we'll turn on the video.
The Jewish mystical tradition, the Kabbalah, formed an integral part of the Torah's transmission from its very beginnings. The earliest Kabbalistic works are attributed to Abraham, the first Jew, or even earlier to Adam, the first man. The Talmud and the Midrashim incorporate many Kabbalistic passages. These teachings, however, were the exclusive province of a small number of sages who engaged in the study of this esoteric wisdom, and even fewer who dared to disseminate it. The prophet Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot, Merkava, recorded in the book of Ezekiel, is the biblical source for many Kabbalistic principles and ideas. A number of early Kabbalistic texts were composed in Mishnaic times, in the 1st and 2nd century of the Common Era. These texts, however, are extremely terse and mysterious, their meaning decipherable only to those who were privy to the oral tradition that accompanied them. The great Mishnaic sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught the wisdom of Kabbalah to a close circle of disciples. These discourses and discussions were recorded in the Zohar, which remains the most basic text of Kabbalah. The Zohar, however, would remain a secret text for more than 1,000 years, although snippets of it found their way into some of the Torah works composed in the interim. The first fissures in the veil of secrecy surrounding Kabbalah began to appear in the 12th century in Spain, France, Italy, and Germany, where small groups of Kabbalists and their disciples were expounding and transcribing their teachings. It was during this period that the Zohar was first published, making its hitherto hidden teachings available to those who were admitted into the secretive Kabbalistic circles. The Chassidim of Ashkenaz was a school of Jewish mystics who were active in the German Rhineland in the 12th and 13th centuries. Its leaders, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid and Rabbi Elazar Rokeach of Worms. One of the preeminent sages of Spanish Jewry, Nachmanides, authored important works in all areas of Torah, biblical commentary, Talmudic analysis, Torah law, philosophy, and ethics. Nachmanides was also a master Kabbalist who incorporated many Kabbalistic ideas into his commentary on the Torah. Rabbi Abraham Abulafia and his disciples, active in 13th century Italy, emphasized the practice of meditative Kabbalah and the attainment of mystical union with God. Other noted Kabbalists of the medieval period include the anonymous author of the foundational Kabbalistic work Ma'arechet HaElokut and Rabbi Yosef Gikatila, Rabbi Menachem Merkanti, Rabbi Meir ibn Gabbai, and Rabbi Yehuda Chayat. Despite the surge in dissemination by the medieval Kabbalists, Kabbalah was still a secret discipline, studied and taught by an exclusive circle of mystics. The next breakthrough came in the mid-16th century, when Tzfat, a city in the north of the Holy Land, became a center of Jewish mystical learning. One of the early teachers of Kabbalah in Tzfat was Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz, who is known as the author of the mystical poem Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved to Meet the Bride, sung in Jewish communities on Friday evening to welcome the Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef Karo, known primarily as the author of the Shulchan Aruch Code of Jewish Law, was also an accomplished Kabbalist, who recorded his mystical visions in his Magid Mesharim. At the hub of the Tzfat mystics were two great teachers of Kabbalah, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, known as Ramak, and Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, known by the acronym Ari, the Lion. Ramak's encyclopedic Hardis Ramonim, Orchard of Pomegranates, was a first of its kind, systematic explanation of the multitude of worlds, virot, and concepts that populate Kabbalistic teaching. Ari, although his sojourn in Tzfat was cut short after only 2 years when he died in a plague at the age of 38, left behind numerous disciples and a vast body of teachings. Indeed, almost all subsequent Jewish mystical learning is predicated on the Ari's teaching. Ari revolutionized the realm of Jewish mystical learning by proclaiming that the restrictions on disseminating Kabbalistic teachings applied only in earlier generations, and that in these times it is permitted and obligatory to reveal this wisdom. As a result, a number of Ari's disciples labored to record and publicize his teachings and to seed centers of Kabbalistic learning throughout the Jewish world. One of these disciples, Rabbi Israel Sarug, traveled for 20 years throughout Italy, the Balkans, Germany, Poland, Turkey, Egypt, and elsewhere to introduce the Lurianic Kabbalah. From Tzfat, the teachings of Kabbalah spread across the Jewish world. In the following generations, additional masters and schools of Kabbalistic learning developed in various Jewish communities. Maharal was a mystic and philosopher who expressed Kabbalistic ideas in philosophical terms. His teachings influenced many subsequent schools of Jewish thought. Maharal's Kabbalah appears to derive from earlier sources, as the Tzfatian Kabbalah had not yet reached Eastern Europe in his day. There is a tradition that Maharal used Kabbalistic formulae to create a golem, a humanoid, to save the Jewish community of Prague from the frequent blood libels of the time. Another influential figure in Jewish philosophy and mysticism was Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, who served as a rabbi in numerous Jewish communities in both Europe and the Holy Land, including Dubna, Frankfurt, Prague, Jerusalem, Tzfat, and Tiberias. He's known as Shalah, after his magnum opus, Shnei Luchot Habrit, 2 Tablets of the Covenant, which blends Kabbalah, Talmudic discourse, Torah law and customs, biblical commentary, and ethics. Shalah's works incorporate the teachings of Ramak and Ari and their disciples. Other 16th and 17th century Kabbalists include Rabbi Yisrael Najar of Gaza, Rabbi Menachem Azaria di Fano of Italy, and Rabbi Naftali Hertz Bachrach of Germany. Prominent 18th century Kabbalists include Ramchal, a prodigious author of Kabbalah, philosophy, ethics, and poetry, and Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar. The Gra school of Kabbalah encompasses the Kabbalistic teachings of Rabbi Eliyahu, the Gaon of Vilna, and his disciples. In Jerusalem, the Bet El School of Kabbalah was a center of mystical learning for 250 years. Its leaders included Rabbi Shalom Sharabi of Yemen and Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chidah. Notwithstanding all of this activity and publications, Kabbalah remained a closed book for the great majority of Jews. The teachings remained esoteric, requiring a subtle mind and extensive knowledge and training to properly understand. As a rule, the restrictions placed on the study of Kabbalah were still widely enforced. For example, a person had to be past the age of 40 and had to be thoroughly versed in the revealed portions of the Torah, such as Talmud and Halacha, before they would be permitted to approach its hidden element. The final breakthrough, which paved the way for the realization of the Ari's declaration that the time had come for the inner soul of Torah to be revealed, came with the founding of the Hasidic movement by Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov in 1734. In addition to revealing an entirely new dimension of Torah, Hasidism also popularized and made accessible the teachings of Kabbalah by explaining its ideas in ways that made them comprehensible and applicable to all.
How many books that from what were mentioned did you recognize? Any? Ever heard some of the names? No? You knew a few? Yeah. Because some of those teachings are touched upon in different places and like really, shouldn't say dumbing down, but simplifying, really. I should say simplifying the teachings. You have in your student books, you have a more detailed description in page 238. You have this in page and the following pages of these different stages that were mentioned in Kabbalah or on this video of the progression of Kabbalah over time, and you could check that out at a later time, so you could familiarize yourself with some of the people, some of the teachings. Obviously, there's so many of them have this fascinating personal story that is told about them, and there's so much to learn about these great and these inspiring figures. So before I continue, any questions on what was mentioned so far about Kabbalah or about Chassidus, what was thrown out to you? I know it's a lot of information. Everyone's on board, no one's overwhelmed? No?
The only thing I would
Yeah.
ask is there a not deliberately being, is there like a Maimonides 101 or Maimonides for dummies or a Maimonides for a fourth grader?
You're asking for Maimonides or Kabbalah?
Maimonides.
Maimonides. See, when we say Maimonides, for example, we're mean a person. And Maimonides dabbled in different areas. It's not all Jewish law. Maimonides wrote about dieting. He wrote about sleeping. He wrote about hemorrhoids. I mean, Maimonides wrote about a lot of things. He wrote a guide for the perplexed, right? He wrote about philosophy. So I would say start with a biography on the Rambam, but to dive into his teachings, I would first choose what area, and then I could recommend, if you want one specific area, I could recommend a few books that would be satisfying.
I know I took the conversation back. But
Yeah.
asking, but-
So obviously, you can study this for your whole life. You're never going to get it all.
The truth is, you could say that about anything,
That's true.
right? Any
That's true.
subject. I mean, even those that won Nobel Prize in a certain area are still studying their fields, right?
Just even studying the literature that was just mentioned.
Is
Yeah.
a lifetime of work, yeah. What's based on your question, I would explain that for a person to study, but more like teach Kabbalah, because if you want to know what's a reliable source on Kabbalah, Okay, there are books out there. I mean, go on Amazon, write Kabbalah, you'll be loaded with, you'll be overwhelmed with the choices that they offer. I would say that there has to be the author needs a background in more than one area. As in, someone cannot be proficient in Kabbalah if they're not proficient in Torah, Medrash, Mishnah, Gemara, Hakira, Musar, and that's just a few, because there are more. We just narrowed it down to 6 weeks, but there are more. Meaning, the first test is to see how much do they know. And the second test I would say is, are they essentially promoting the study of Torah and the practice of mitzvot or not? If it comes with discounts, those sales that something's offered, right? If it's too cheap, there's a problem with it, right? Not always, but typically. You opt out for the cheaper item, chances are it'll break quicker, it'll fade out in the first load of laundry, whatever it is, right? And the same thing is here, that if what they're teaching is not promoting its origin and it's contradicting its origin, then there's some agenda-driven teaching there. And that has been, the last good few years, that has been widely publicized because, it's fun, put on a green, red string around your wrist and spray some water, and it sounds like you're into Kabbalah, but it's way more than that, of course. If only things would be so simple or so easy. And the teachings over time have been trying to keep the Torah alive, but also keep that background tradition alive. Now, we spoke about Kabbalah. Now, what do you know about Chassidism or Chassidus? Anyone familiar with Chassidus or Chassidism? Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi Spears,
Speak up. So,
Rabbi Spears is the founder of Chassidus, I believe. You're the outreach branch of Judaism. You welcome everybody. You're not trying to convert non-Jews, but you bring anybody back in with you. You're very accessible.
Took it to the masses and away from the people that were just the top of it.
took it to the masses. Renee say, yeah. The Baal Shem Tov, yeah. Leonard, yeah.
I seem to remember the Hasidim were originated as the 17th before that's been possible. You also need not that more strength and ritualistic.
Yep.
At least that's what I heard.
Hasidism, or I'm going to call it Chassidus, just the way I pronounce it. So I'm giving you an inside term. All right. Chassidus was introduced, as we saw, by a rabbi named Rabbi Yisrael, whose nickname was the Baal Shem Tov, master of the good name. And there were a few people named Baal Shem Tov. He wasn't the only one, but he's the only one named Rabbi Yisrael. And he was part of this small group that studied Kabbalah, but they came to this realization. At the time, we're talking about Eastern Europe specifically. At the time, you had people studying, leading their Jewish life in shtetls and other cities. And what happened, or what he noticed, was that there was this great division in this what became ingrained division within the Jewish community. That it was a division of classes based on knowledge. there were those who knew and those who want to know and those will never know, and they didn't mix and there was no interaction between them. And what he found, what he was disturbed was that there was a synagogue for the learned, a synagogue for the butchers and the bakers, and a synagogue for the others. There was this wide division. What he also noticed was there was a lack of, let's call it, in Yiddish it's called hearts. Hearts means heart, soul. There's a lack of soul in the way some people practice Judaism. We mentioned this a week ago. They were going through the motions, right? But there was no enthusiasm, or the enthusiasm was lost on so many. What he understood based on what he learned, so based on Kabbalah, is that while you see another person, let's say in the airport, okay, you see you're standing online, TSA pre-check, you see 5 people ahead of you. All you see are 5 people. You could describe how they look. You could describe what they're wearing, what they're holding. Everyone's schlepping something in the airport, right? But then when you get to that gate, when the TSA agent is sitting there by the computer and scanning you, suddenly what you're wearing is gone. Still on you, but the TSA agent doesn't see that anymore. The color of your socks, irrelevant. The height of your shoes, the hat, it's all gone. Now what happened? You didn't strip to walk through, right? You're still the same person before and after. Why is that person seeing something different? Because they have a different kind of lens. The Baal Shem Tov took the studies of Kabbalah and created a lens. Now, what happens with the lens? If I take up my glasses, I see people in front of me. I don't see your expression right now. You can stick out your tongue if you wish, okay? But I do not see your expression. I heard the laughter. I didn't see the expression. Why? What changed with me taking off my glasses? Did you change? Did you disappear? No, nothing changed. It's me not being able to see well. My view of the world, right? It changes my view of the world. The world remains the same. Until then, people saw each other for what they are. And that's it. The Baal Shem Tov said, let's start seeing people with the lens of Kabbalah, which he, in the method that he called, or the teaching that he called Chassidus or Chassidism, and let's see people for what they could be. Not just what they are, what they could be. So he saw a person wearing a blue cap and whatever shorts, but when he saw that person, he was like the TSA agent, he saw a soul. He saw a soul. And what is a soul? A soul is a piece of God. B'tzelem Elokim, Chelkat Elokim, Chelek Elokah, the Tanya teaches, etc. When he sees a person, he sees a soul. He sees a piece of God in this world waiting to express itself, waiting to fulfill his or her potential. Problem is, as I mention always, our body and our soul don't have a direct line. One's on Facebook Messenger, the other one's on WhatsApp. They just can't communicate. Different methods. And so that's where we struggle. That's where we try to search ourselves, and we sometimes feel like we're walking in the dark, and sometimes we do something and it makes us feel good, and we do something else and makes us feel bad. And it takes us time to figure out ourselves. But according to the lens of Chassidus, it's not just the way the founder saw how to see people, but he says these glasses are available to everyone. Everyone could put them on. Everyone could practice the knowledge of Kabbalah and Chassidus, even if they don't fully understand the full makeup and the background and the inner workings of it. Do I know how these glasses were constructed? I maybe know where they were made at best. I don't even know my prescription. And it's not relevant to me. I put them on. I see you guys. It's great. I don't need more, right? And so he teaches Chassidus. So that's why I wouldn't call Chassidus practical Kabbalah. I know some people say that. I don't feel that's fair, because Kabbalah is the inner workings, but it's not the application of it. See, Chassidus took the idea of Kabbalah and then used that to try to interpret everything, and I mean everything around us. For example, we learned, and I think it was our third lesson, there was a line that said, if you see the donkey of your enemy not being able to handle its weight, remember that? Right? Famous teaching. And we gave you the literal explanation of it. Turn to page 263, if you will. And let me show you 262, actually. 262. Let me show you how the teaching of the Torah remains as in pshat, as in the literal meaning, but how this simple teaching looks with the lens of Chassidus. Okay, again, it's not contradicting, it's adding. Okay. The instruction, this is from Exodus, Parshas Mishpatim, it says, text 17, when you see the donkey of your enemy collapsing under its burden, and you are inclined to desist from helping him, you must assist with him. What's the instruction? If someone's in need, whether you like it or not, help them. Right? Straightforward, compassionate, just, teaches us about shared responsibility, right? And we discussed why the dual language, we went into that. But let's turn to 263 and see how the Baal Shem Tov teaches this, or Chassidus teaches this line, this verse from Exodus. It goes like this. When you see the chamor comes from the word chemar. Chamor means a donkey, but it also means materialism, a piece, a physical piece. When you contemplate your material self, which is your body, you will see that it is, and now he quotes again scripture, of your enemy. The material self is antagonistic to the soul, which yearns for godliness and spirituality. And therefore, you will further see that it is, and he quotes again scripture, collapsing under its burden. God gave the Torah and its commandments to sanctify our physical existence, but the body regards them as a burden and is loath to fulfill them. Your inclination may therefore be, and he quotes again scripture, and you are inclined to desist from helping him. You may be inclined to deprive your body in order to break its materialistic nature. This approach, however, is not the way by which the light of Torah will come to dwell in us. Rather, one last quote, you must assist with him. Lift up the body by refining it and elevating it. What does this teach you? This line. What have you learned from this?
Self-improvement is key. You don't have the right to desist from it. You've got to be working at it.
Yep, exactly. There were times that people believed that the more we fast, the more we hurt ourselves. the greater we will, the more refined we'll become. And the Baal Shem Tov says that is a way, but it can't be a way anymore, at least not for the masses. It's just not practical. Self-inflicted pains. There was one Jew already died from that, and he was hung, and enough. You know the joke that a Jewish guy is in the hospital, and he insists that they take the cross off hanging above the bed. And they're like, why? He's like, I'm suffering. Enough one Jew suffering in the room. I don't need to. But there were times that people actually used pain to cleanse themselves from sins. The Baal Shem Tov says we need to bring joy, and I should say back to Judaism. You have to bring soul back to Judaism, excitement back. You have to be passionate about it. And what he was teaching is that we have to see our body not as the enemy, but someone to work with. And so if you're passionate, he taught, about a certain area, if you have a talent in a certain area, there's no need to repress it. Just channel it to the right direction. There was a time that artists were frowned upon in the religious Jewish community in Eastern Europe. If someone wanted to become an artist, well, they might as well just take up their kippah and leave. And many did. My wife's grandfather's brother-in-law, his name was Hendel Lieberman. Hendel Lieberman, that was his name. He was an artist, yeshiva boy, and at first they see art and they're like, oh, we're gonna send you out, we'll kick you out. But he grew up in Chabad, and they're like, no, continue, do well. And the result is beautiful art that the family still has, and it's printed in the book, and there's galleries all over. The idea is that what you're given, and that is the opportunities, the abilities, the passions, the desires, the experiences, the positive and the negative, everything could be used to become better, to make the world better. So while beforehand, I can't say people were walking without glasses, they did not see the view, but in a way he just added a clearer lens, a brighter lens, a rosier lens to see the world and practice what we see and what we believe in. So, yeah, go ahead.
We go back to the gentleman having trouble with his donkey. I think that, this guy's having trouble with his donkey, and the donkey's stuck in the whatever. So this is an opportunity for me, and he takes off and he runs and he's gone. So does that mean God should strike him down for running and not helping this man and his donkey?
It would be nice, but God doesn't do that, sadly. We don't live in a fair world.
But I mean, I could see that. I could see this is my opportunity. I can take off.
Yeah. And take revenge, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in this teaching, there's character development, there's so much in this simple teaching, but you look at the lens of Chassidus, and it's seen in a whole new beautiful light. And Chassidus has been used and taught and practiced throughout the world. There was initial opposition to it because it seemed a bit too radical. Number one, making it accessible to all. Some people had a problem with it, naturally, and new ideas come around. There's always questioning that makes sense. And also, it wasn't clear that, how important is joy in Judaism. And some people did not take a liking to that. And there were fierce debates over time. But you could look back now, you could look back, with the gift of time, you look back and you could see how it's not a contradiction. Teachings could go hand in hand, and the same way one morning or one meal, you're in the mood of something sweet, next day or next hour or next minute, you could be in the mood of something savory or bitter, right? It's not a contradiction. It's just all taste buds. And Chassidus has since been taught, practiced, and as Wendy pointed out, it really is the driving idea of Chabad as a movement that, while in practice is or could be classified as orthodox, or some use ultra-orthodox, but that's in personal practice, but in the way Chabad relates to others is simply with that Baal Shem Tov Chassidus lens of, I'm looking at a soul. I'm looking at a soul. That's the essence. And whether or not we immediately accept it, sometimes it's not easy, but that is the source. That is the source of the person. And so whether I approve of what they've done or not, regardless, I'm still meeting another Jew. And by meeting another Jew, it's a meeting of souls. So to meet a long lost friend, I don't need introductions. All you have to do is pick up the phone, add it this week. Classmate from Montreal, I haven't spoken to him in like a few weeks. We didn't need introductions. We just dove right into the conversation. We didn't need, all right, nice to meet you. That wasn't needed, pleasantries. Obviously, how you doing and such. And so a meeting of people is a meeting of souls, which means a meeting of relatives, really. A meeting of similarities. And differences are not needed. Yeah,
I just have a question about
sure.
the different branches of Chassidus.
Mhm.
Versus, when I think of Chassidism, I always think of Kabbalah, and I know that there are other branches. Do they
Correct.
have the same philosophy? How are they different?
Well, we would have to go into each one, but if you, let's go back to, just to get a quick view on some of them here. This is page,
Yeah, so some of them.
you saw some of them?
Yeah.
This is page figure 6.2D. What page is it on yours?
246.
246?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have, everyone has it, or some have it, okay. So you have the Maharal, no, that's not Chassidus. Where is Chassidus? Chassidus is another one. Chassidus is 246, page 246. That's what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I was on the wrong page. Okay, 246. So you have here the Baal Shem Tov, that's his shul in Mezhebush, a small little town in Ukraine. I was in there, they rebuilt, the synagogue has since been destroyed, but they rebuilt it. Exactly the same. It's really fascinating. Luckily, it has not been harmed in over the past year in the war. It's still around. What the Baal Shem Tov had is, following his teaching, you had what he taught. I can't say divided, it's not a positive word. It was followed by different streams. One of the most famous ones was called the Magid, Rabbi Dover of Mezrich, also in Ukraine, small little town. And each took it to, I can't say a different direction, but I'll give you an example. So you have here on the bottom, you have Tanya. That was authored by someone called the Alter Rebbe. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He was known for legal writings, but he authored the Tanya to provide I would say, the first Jewish self-help book ever written. And that's what the Tanya is in a way. And he focused on how we relate to ourselves and to others with the understanding of Kabbalah and Chassidus. Go up and you have Kedushas Halevi, 1796. That was written by a rabbi, also small town in Ukraine called Berdichev, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, and he focused more on the love for the people, and he was known as someone who treated everyone really equally, but with, I'd say, extreme love, even like just super kind to everyone, and even, I'll give you an example of his approach to life. He's walking out of shul on a Shabbos morning. After services, he's walking with some folks, and he's walking through the streets. In Berdichev, until today, there's a little market there, and some of the roads are paved, some aren't. So he's walking out of his shul, and he sees a fellow Jewish person smoking. Now, smoking not permitted on Shabbos, but that guy's smoking. And he sees the rabbi walking towards him, but he continues to smoke. This guy clearly doesn't care, right? Now, your typical interaction back in the day would be the rabbi telling the person, how could you be smoking? How dare you, right? And I mean, I can't say the person would be wrong for doing so. I mean, you're smoking, you're on Shabbos in front of others, in front of the rabbi. I mean, a little shame, put it behind, let this smoke be seen, but not continue to smoke. Well, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak walks towards him. He says, "Oh, I'm sure you got so confused. You don't know it's Shabbos today." And the person says, "No, I know it's Shabbos. Good Shabbos to you too." It's like, "Oh, I'm sure you don't know that on Shabbos we're not meant to smoke." It's like, "No, I know. It says in the Torah, don't light a fire. I'm well aware." Now what would you say next? This guy has chutzpah, right? So what does he say? Rabbi Yitzchak turns up to the sky and says, "God, look at this. Jews, even on Shabbos, even when they know they're doing something wrong, they still don't lie." That's the way he approached things. That's Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. You have 1808, that's Breslev, famous stream of Chassidus. Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, he's buried in Uman, also in Ukraine, more central Ukraine. Rabbi Nachman taught, I would say, full submission to God. If I want to narrow it down to a few words. Likutei Moharan is when he taught that, you submit yourself to God's will, and even sort of said, don't question it, don't, I mean, some others disagree, but that was his approach. And then you have the Sfas Emes, you have Pri Tzadik. So different rabbis took different approaches to how to make it practical. For example, the Rebbe, you have one of his book series called the Likutei Sichos. It's 40 volumes based on his talks on Torah and holidays, and I have it at home. Majority of it is written in Yiddish, actually, was said in Yiddish, and he was very into taking the parsha and making it applicable to daily life. And not everyone did that, that was one of his approaches. So different rabbis took different teachings and made it accessible, teachable, relatable in different ways. But they all follow the Baal Shem Tov and his approach. Yeah.
What about the Suffolk Chassidim?
Yeah.
Do they it's just another
They're-
slightly another version of the name?
another version of the lens, as you know, a Google search will reveal this to you, so I'm not really revealing any dirty secrets here. They're heavily opposed to Zionism and Israel at a point of, this is my judgment, the opposite of Ahavat Yisrael, loving a fellow Jew. But they believe that there are times, and this is prolonging, but they believe there are times that Torah is at stake, and therefore it sort of supersedes the instruction of loving your fellow Jew. As you can imagine, I don't agree with that. But
What's the name of?
Satmar,
Oh,
Satmar. They have other names like Nitori Karta, and there's some other branches, but it's a similar Toldos Aaron, Toldos Avram Yitzchak. Another classmate of mine we studied in Israel and Bnei Brak together. He grew up in such a family, and so I used to visit him on Shabbos. This is the area in Jerusalem where if someone's not dressed appropriately, they'll throw stuff at the person. So luckily I had my friend when we used to go there. I used to stay there at night on Shabbos. He used to protect me because even I'm not religious enough for them. So you have that. Yeah, so you have people taking it into different directions, of course. Any theory, you could use math to calculate something simple or something great. So that's the teachings of Chassidus. We have a few minutes left. I could do one or two things here. I have an option of giving you to study actual Zohar, actual Kabbalah, and try to give you a fairly understandable explanation of it. Or I could dive into the Moda'ani prayer according to how Chassidus teaches. Want to speak up or not, or leave it to me? I'm open. My wife's not expecting me back for the next, 40 minutes, huh? Moda'ani? Well, yeah.
Like to have a little bit clearer idea of the differences between Zohar, Kabbalah, and Tanya.
Oh, simple. Zohar is the core, the original. Okay. Tanya is the Hasidic application of Zohar. That's simple.
And then where's the Kabbalah fit in?
Kabbalah, Zohar is the book of Kabbalah. It's not the sole book of the Kabbalah, but it's a central book of Kabbalah. Zohar is the category of Kabbalah. We're doing Moda'ani?
Yeah.
Yeah? Huh? You want to do Zohar? Oh, I mean, if you guys are rushing, if you're not rushing, I could do both.
That would be nice.
You want to do both? Okay, I'm good. And if you walk out, I won't be offended. How about this? I'll teach the Zohar. We'll officially conclude the class. If someone wants to leave, and then we'll continue with the Moda'ani. Sounds good? Okay, let's go to 248. Okay, this is text from the Zohar. As I said, it's a Kabbalistic work. It's written in Aramaic. I'm going to read the first two lines just so you hear how it sounds. Bereish Homer Nasa de Malka Galif Glufe Betihiru Ila Butzina de Kardunisa. That's Aramaic for you. All right, bless you. Here's the English translation of it. And although it's in English, you'll see already. At the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will, the lamp of darkness engravings in the supernal purity. It emanated from the most concealed of all concealed things, from the secret of endlessness. A formless vapor was inserted into a circle that was neither white nor black nor red nor green, nor any color at all. When he began its measurements, he created bright colors to shine forth. From within the center of the lamp, a fountain sprouted, from which the colors down below were painted. All right, since you all understand that, well, let's wrap it up. Whose head is spinning? Take a moment, try to figure out what it's even trying to say, something. Let's take a half a minute or a minute. Read it.
Sounds like the first moments of creation.
First moments of creation, okay. Yeah,
Everything was there, but not visible or knowledge, but not something you could see. Again, it was there, but not visible.
everything was there but not visible. Okay,
But it's also interesting, continue. Might have been creation. Still got the secret of endlessness. Insult.
so the world's endless, you're saying? No. Oh, you're saying it is,
It's endless, the world is endless, and the endless impact is endless.
and God's so the world's endless and God's impact is endless. Okay. Weaver, you're too practical for this, right? These are lawyers, like, what are you talking about? Okay. Any other attempts, or we're gonna try to figure this out?
Why is it in Aramaic?
I don't know. I think that was a language that that Jews used at the time, like the Talmud, right? And it's been translated since, but that's the language they use. So it doesn't mean that's a language it was taught in, because when it was written, that's what they used, so they used Aramaic. But my point is, the Aramaic is not to have people not understand it, because everyone spoke Aramaic at the time. It's more what's said that's not understandable. So if you have it in English, it's still not understood. Yeah,
Aramaic was the language spoken in second century Israel.
Yeah. not even, correct. Yep.
That's why it's supposedly, it was written. But there's some controversy who actually wrote it.
Yeah, there are controversies, there are discussions, but I leave that to the researchers and academics to figure out, not my problem. Okay, to understand what the Zohar is saying, we're gonna take a little road and get back to it. Okay, here we go. Let's look at page 250. And we're gonna stand a little, we're gonna have to understand this paradox, and it goes as follows. It says in Talmud Brachos, this is text 6. God fills the world like the soul fills the body. As in, God is fully immersed in the world. God fills the world like the soul fills the body. Okay. Now, when we're saying God fills the world, we're saying that there's God in everything in the world. There's holiness, there's divine energy in everything that exists. Without that, nothing exists. So everything needs a small amount, right? In past courses, we discussed more about it, but everything needs something. A projector needs more power than a computer, right? Because it just needs more to show. So a stone needs just a drop, a human needs an actual soul. But this is introduced as a dangerous idea. Why is it a dangerous idea? Comes the warning in Deuteronomy as follows. It says like this. V'nishmartem me'od l'nafsho seicha. Guard your souls exceedingly, as you have not seen any form on the day that God spoke to you at Horeb, which is Mount Sinai, from within the fire, lest you be corrupted and make for yourselves a graven image, the form of any symbol, and be led astray to bow it and worship it. And according to Maimonides, he explains this in in his commentary to the Mishnah. The third principle, this is part of his 13 principles of faith. The third principle is the negation of any physical qualities in regards to God, meaning we believe that God is neither a physical entity nor a physical force, nor is he subject to any physical state. Which means what we're saying is that we're saying God lives within, but is not confined to anything that we see. As in, God's in a rock, but is the rock God? Is God the rock? No. And yet, Deuteronomy warns us, don't see anything in the world as if this fully reflects God. So you have God's in everything, but everything is not God. Where does that lead us to? Isaiah, text 9, says the Holy One, to what can you liken me that I would be compared? I'm greater than any physical entity, being. I'm greater than it all. You cannot confine me to a specific area. The warning, this was the warning against idol worship, for example, believing that powers in the world and objects in the world had some kind of power on their own. And so to understand that and to compare that to the way that the Torah in a few ways gives God these human qualities. Like you have in text 10, you have a compassionate, gracious God, slow to anger, greatness, beauty, triumph, splendor. What is the meaning of all these human attributes that we give to God while God is beyond all that? The idea is as follows, that in order for God to create the world, he needed to contract. Again, I shouldn't use dumb down, but contract this great, endless, infinite, power is not the right word, but we'll use power, to try to bring it into the form of a physical world. Think of where water is coming from, the strong, super strong stream, and it's narrowed down to a single hose. Well, I want a lot of water. I want a strong shower, a strong pressure in my shower. Let's get a huge big hose. It wouldn't be able to handle it. It has to contract in order to give even something strong, but it has to contract. So for God to create the world, he contracted his powers to what we describe as the 10 sphirot, 10 specific powers or tools through which the world was created. 255, you have it. Let me skip to it. The 10 sphirot. There we go. So you have it on the screen and you have it in front of you. Which means, in order for a car to drive, I need to deal with rubber, air, I need to deal with glass, an engine. I have no idea what goes in there, so I don't know what's there, but I guess there's oil, there's gas in there, there's some other things, windshield wipe fluids, right? But for a single vehicle that moves, you need all these different types of components, which are not similar to each other. And the same idea, these 10 sphirot, the makeup of the world, which I'll explain is also the makeup of ourselves, is how God said, I'm now creating these tools to create the world and create the person. So any chemist around you will tell you there's particles in the world, there are different aspects around us that we see, we don't see, etc. We're all made up of these 10 sefirot, and so is the world. And in fact, some go on to, not some, but they go on to explain how our body that is the shape of our body. And so you have crown, keter, will, wisdom, understanding. And then you have power, benevolence, beauty, splendor, victory, foundation, sovereignty. This chart is worth a class on its own, but it just gives you an idea of how this is based on Kabbalah, how the makeup of the world and ourselves, that is our makeup. And that's why we have these conflicting feelings about ourselves, because we carry both power and benevolence, and we have beauty and we have our victory. So we have ambition on one side and we have seeking truth on the other, and sometimes it clashes with devotion or our own femininity, our own receptiveness and leadership. All these different aspects all clashing because we're made up of these wonderful, different, sometimes conflicting attributes. Okay? Yeah.
So this is a dumb question, but there
No.
are 11 attributes here, so why are they going to 10?
The Malchus is considered beyond, or some attached to together, as in they're really one of the same. So Yesod and Malchus would be considered the same, or some do Malchus and Keter, the top one, as the same. Okay? You could, in text 13, just to put it in words, this verse contains a deep idea which is sealed away in the treasure houses of the Kabbalists who seek out God. It holds the secret of the structure of the 10 sefirot. Sefirot means numbers, literally, by the way, but it's really the microcosm of ourselves in the world, which is the human being incorporates in themselves, and for which the human form is an analog. God therefore says in our image, meaning when he says, let's build humans in our image in Genesis, he means in the image that we made for ourselves, as in we created an image. We don't look like God, we look like the image that God created. The Tzelem Elokim, the image that God created. Now, the Zohar, or the additions, the commentaries to the Zohar says, let us make human in our own image after our likeness. Each sephira, each attribute, imparted its portion to the human being internally and externally. Had only one of the sephirot not been imparted in its portion, the structure of the human being would have been incomplete. Everything was created. Okay. The next teaching, this is from Pardes Ramon and Rav Moshe Cortevero, and he explains as follows. And if your head's floating, we're going to try to ground this back, okay, as best of my abilities. Okay, he says, in truth, in regard to our Creator, the infinite Creator of all, we cannot speak or describe or acquire neither judgment nor comparison, nor compassion, neither anger nor wrath, neither variation or limitation, nor any properties whatsoever, not before the emanation of the Sefirot, for now, after they are emanated. Now, here's what he compares it to. He compares it to a clear liquid like water that you put in a colorful jar, right? Like the Chassidus glasses that I told you earlier, makes you see the world different, although the world's the same. When you see something that looks like blue colored water, is the water blue? I mean, that Powerade, yeah, but not water. If it's in a blue vessel, it looks blue. That means these are reflections that we perceive the water in. put it in something else, and now it looks different. Which means all the names that are given to God, compassion, etc., are just us trying to grasp something from God. It's not defining God. And so each of ourselves, we're in God's image, but we don't look like God. Because God does not have a look. It would be nice, but God does not have a look. Now, here's where that text 5, we could now we understand it. Okay. In the text, and let me put it up. Okay. At the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will, the lamp of darkness engraved engravings in the supernal purity. Supernal purity is that when I take you see there's a strong light coming out of the projector. I look straight at it, I cannot see anyone, no matter what kind of glasses. What will make me see you? Huh? A little darkness. Okay. The world was created with what could be seen as something that is contradicting or even covering godliness. You look around in the world and you don't see God. You don't feel spirituality. Everything in the world is almost a contradiction to God, right? But that needed to be created in order for the world to exist. We needed that lamp of darkness. The lamp was there, but darkness was created in front of it. And the supernal purity is the purity. It is God himself. The lamp is the spirot through which the world was created, and essentially ourselves. And as I said, the lamp of darkness is the contraction through which the world was created. You see? And then we continue reading. It came from the most concealed of all concealed things, from the secret of endlessness. The source of God is the secret of endlessness, infinity. A formless vapor was inserted into a circle that was neither white nor black nor red nor green, as in it created these coverings through which we could look at the glass of water and see colors and try to grasp it in some type of way. And then finally, from which the colors, you see the last line, the colors drop down below were painted. And everything was placed in order for us to try to understand it and accept it. Now, if we take that and we, for example, use that teaching that we had earlier about the donkey and how you shouldn't fight yourself really, or work with yourself. The idea is that although things are not visible, although things are darkened, we have the faith, or if you're beyond faith, then the knowledge. That's even greater than faith, the bitachon. The knowledge that the light is always there, whether it's covered or not. The source of light is good. The source of light is pure. The source of light is always there. And then the obstacle we see, the hardship we go through, is just something we don't understand and we're challenged to contend with. Not the end of the road. It's not a reason to give up. And it doesn't reflect on us. It's just a situation that we're put in. For whatever reason that we do. We're not given the reasons. That's one example of Zohar. How's that? Your head's still spinning, no?
I might have gotten it from accidentally, once upon a time, buying one of those Kabbalah books that comes from
Yeah,
the Los Angeles place.
yeah,
And I mean, I learned my lesson. I didn't, I knew it had been a mistake, but. So if that's where I learned this, set me straight. There's something about the stones that the priests wore on their vestments that would change color. Does that have anything to do with this?
I'm not familiar with that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm not familiar. I haven't heard that. It looks visual, but I've not, yeah, I've not heard that. Okay. Move on to next. Are we good with this? Or you're like, we will be. Let's move on. Huh?
Some here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
This is just an example of how Kabbalah is cryptic, remains cryptic, and even after giving you the best my shot, I'm sure some of you are like, yeah, not going there regardless. But it's just an example. Let's turn to page 272. Okay. Oh, that's our next course. All right, we'll do that shortly. Okay. Every morning there is Moda'ani, the opening prayer of the day, prayer of gratitude. It goes very simple. Moda'ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayim, shechazarta bi, nishmasi bechemla, rabba munasecha. I submit thanks to you, living and ever-enduring King, that you have restored my soul within me with compassion. Great is your faithfulness. We say this every morning because we believe that sleep is, they say, 1/10 of death. And so there is no assurance that tomorrow morning we'll be waking up again. We hope for it. We make plans for the next day, right? But we're not taking it for granted. Maybe not. And so every day that we're given is another blessing given to us by God. And we express ourselves right in the morning, right before anything happens, before checking our phone. We first do Moda'ani, thank you, God. And then we go on with what goes on in Ukraine or wherever else you're worried about. Now, here's the different levels of interpretation of Moda'ani. So you have this on 272, right? It goes like this. This is first we have the direct interpretation. Every time we partake in the gifts of life, anything that the world has to offer us, eating food, smelling a flower, we first recite a blessing, brachot. We recite a blessing in appreciation and awareness of the Creator who gave us that ability to smell, to eat, to hear, etc. Certainly then, if we do a blessing on things, like even seeing a rainbow, for example, then the gift of life deserves a blessing. And this blessing does not contain God's name in it even. It just says you. When you're so close to something, you don't need to label it. It's you. You don't need an introduction. Just you. For this reason, at the Moda'ani is said immediately upon awaking, even before we wash our hands and before the morning, our morning duties. Although it's forbidden to mention God's name at that time, we still say it. Now, according to Chassidus, it teaches like this: a name is a representation. So when we address God by one of his names, we're revealing an aspect or our projection of one of God's attributes or one of our understandings of God. But when we relate to God as you, we relate to God's essence. There's a story told. This father was playing with this kid. He asked, actually a grandfather was playing with this kid. I think it was the Alter Rebbe actually. He asked his grandson, where is Zaidi? Where is grandpa? And the kid's right near him and he points. Here's grandpa. He says, no, that's grandpa's arm. Where's grandpa? Here. No, that's my forehead. Where's grandpa? That's my stomach or chest. Where's grandpa? Well, that's my leg. Everything he was pointing at, he said, no, you're pointing to something of grandpa. This is not grandpa. The kid gave up. So he goes to the other room and he starts screaming, grandpa, grandpa. And he starts worrying. Zaidi, Zaidi, he starts worrying. Where is he? He runs out. The moment he enters the hallway, the kid points, that's grandpa. All of you. I'm not pointing to a single thing. All of you, your entire entity came out, then that's who you are. And in the morning, we're pointing to Hashem, we're pointing to God and saying, thank you. I'm not thanking you for something specifically you created and you passed on in different aspects of your being. I'm just saying, all of you, thank you, beyond anything that could even express. It's just you. The second line, this is the teaching of, this is the allegory, this is more medrash, a bit of medrash, a bit of Talmud, a Gemara, and it goes like this on the Modani. One of the fundamental beliefs in Judaism is the resurrection of the dead, Tchiyat HaMeitim. The Talmud describes sleep as 1/6 of death. So the Modani prayer is we thank God for giving me life again after this minor death of sleep. According to the Hasidic interpretation, based on that, it says that we believe that God has not only created the world, but continues to give it life. It's a constant source for the existence of the world. And so it's not that it takes death in the literal sense. It says that without God's will, the world would be dead, would not exist. So everything in the world is a continuation, every moment God is powering the world. This gives a deeper appreciation of the gratitude to God. When we express modality, not only is our soul restored to our body every morning, but our body is also regenerated as it will be in the future resurrection. Indeed, this occurs each and every moment of the day. Our moment of awakening is simply a daily opportunity. Start the day, you do it then, to tangibly experience and acknowledge this truth. According to halacha, legal interpretation, which we studied 2 weeks ago, one of the 613 mitzvot in the Torah is the obligation of hashavat avedah, returning lost objects to its rightful owner. This obligation is categorical, even in the case that the owner of the object has an outstanding financial obligation to us. This does not absolve us from the duty of returning their property to them. They owe you money, but if they lost something, you need to return it. This law is implicit in the Modani prayer. Every night, we entrust our soul to God. Often, we are deficient in our obligations towards our Creator, yet as we confirm in Modani, great is your faithfulness. God returns the trust, regardless of our outstanding debts to Him. During the Gem Show, I've seen this. One of the shows of the Tucson Gem Show is called the AGTA one. It's like high end. You need a pass to get in. I don't shop there, but we give the kosher supervision, so they need us in there. And I noticed that every night after the show ends, everyone's busy emptying out all their glass shelves and putting it in like boxes. And there are guards walking around and storing everything, packing on, like they pack on suitcases, but they're packing on, I don't know, millions of dollars there on this little cart. Diamonds, jewels, gems. And they're all walking, and they go to the safe and they keep it all there. Everyone's jewels are all in there. Every morning they take it all out. And I watch them do it, and they're not concerned when they give it. Why? Because they have insurance. Something's stolen. If the safe is broken into, someone pays them back. There's no concern there. At night, when we say Shema, we're giving our soul to God. There's no promise, but we have assurance that our soul lives on. It's not the end, if it's the end. And in the morning, the merchants, the dealers get their stones back at the show, and they start organizing again. And it's beautiful displays, and it takes time to organize, but they spend a good hour just on their display. But they do it with the same enthusiasm. We got it back, and now we do it again. According to Chassidus, to understand this law, we need to understand what the mitzvah is. There are logical mitzvahs and supernatural mitzvahs, social mitzvahs and religious mitzvahs. But these differentiations all pertain to a mitzvah's garments, the outer packaging. At its core, every mitzvah is the infinite will of God. And so if the Torah commands us to return the property of a fellow that has been placed in our trust, the logic of this mitzvah does not constitute its essence. It lies in the act itself. Final one. This is according to the Kabbalistic understanding, what Modani is. In the terminology of Kabbalah, king, melech, refers to God's involvement within the time and space of creation. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Whether living whereas living and ever ending, what we see in the Modani, describes God as he transcends time and space. In Modani, we attribute the restoration of our soul to the living and ever-ending king, ever-enduring king, implying that it is a product of the union of these two divine modalities. And how Chassidus takes this, the Chassidus lens, and we'll conclude with this: there are no greater opposites than spirit and matter. Spirit expresses its subservience to a higher truth. Matter proclaims its own being. The marriage of body and soul is thus an impossible union of opposites. Every breath of life is an expression of the infinite power of God, who both transcends and permeates existence. New meaning to Modani. Or 4 meanings to Modani that we do on a regular basis. And so, to conclude, we've had a fun journey together the last 6 weeks. Each week we touch on something else. Kabbalah includes all of it, has studied, learned from all of it, and gives us a new appreciation, I feel, a new or clear appreciation for life, for what's around us, that even if we don't understand everything, we understand that there is a cause behind it, there's a plan behind it, and the things that we go through are not necessarily meant to stop us. It's just meant to propel us forward in a better way. So I thank you for joining today's class, and those of you that have participated throughout, thank you all for joining us for Booksmart. We thank the JCC for hosting us and the JLI Institute